Ever felt like you were called to do something way bigger than you? Something that seemed impossible? Today, we're diving into the story of a young man who felt exactly that, and his name was Jeremiah. Before he was known as the Weeping Prophet, he was just a kid from a small priestly town called Anathoth. Life was probably pretty normal, filled with the usual duties and expectations of his family. He likely never imagined that his quiet life was about to be turned completely upside down. One day, everything changed. God spoke to Jeremiah, telling him that even before he was born, he had been chosen for a special mission. He was to be a prophet to the nations. Imagine hearing that. Jeremiah was terrified. He told God, "I'm too young. I don't even know how to speak properly for something like this." He was full of self-doubt, feeling completely unqualified for such a massive task. It's a feeling many of us can relate to when faced with a huge challenge. But God's response was immediate and powerful. He told Jeremiah not to be afraid, promising to be with him and to give him the very words he needed to say. It was a promise of divine partnership, a reassurance that Jeremiah wouldn't have to do this alone. So Jeremiah accepted his calling, but it was far from easy. His message wasn't one of comfort and prosperity. He had to warn the people of Judah that their disobedience and idol worship would lead to disaster. He pleaded with them to turn back to God, but his words often fell on deaf ears. People didn't want to hear it. His own family and friends turned against him. He was rejected, mocked, thrown into a muddy pit, and his life was constantly in danger. It's no wonder he's called the Weeping Prophet. His heart broke for his people, and for the difficult message he had to deliver. Yet, through all the pain and opposition, Jeremiah remained faithful. His story is a powerful reminder that purpose isn't always glamorous, and true strength is often found in standing for what's right, even when you're standing alone. Thanks for watching. If you found this story inspiring, hit that like button and subscribe for more content. See you next time. Jeremiah's words did not soften with time. They sharpened. He stood at the gates of the temple and spoke warnings that felt unthinkable. He told the people that sacred buildings could not save them if their hearts were far from justice and mercy. He told them that sacrifices meant nothing without obedience. This was dangerous language. Priests heard him as a threat. Leaders heard him as rebellion. The people heard him as betrayal. After all, who was Jeremiah to speak like this? One man against centuries of tradition. One voice against a nation convinced of its own righteousness. They mocked him. They plotted against him. Some tried to kill him. Jeremiah began to feel the weight of his calling in his own body. Loneliness became his companion. Grief settled into his bones. He wept for a people who laughed while walking toward disaster. At times, Jeremiah broke. He cried out in anguish, questioning why he had ever been born. Why he had been chosen to carry a message that only brought pain. He wished for silence. He longed for peace. Yet every time he tried to stop speaking, the words burned inside him. Truth, once lit, refused to go dark. As kingdoms shifted around Judah, Jeremiah's warnings became more urgent. Babylon was rising. Empires were clashing. The world beyond Jerusalem's walls was changing fast. Jeremiah told the people what they did not want to hear. Babylon was not just a political threat. It was an instrument of judgment. Resistance would not save them. Pride would not protect them. Only repentance could change the course ahead. This message sealed his reputation as a traitor. When Babylon began to press against Judah, Jeremiah urged surrender. Not because he loved Babylon, but because he understood what stubbornness would cost. The leaders responded by imprisoning him. Thrown into a pit, left in mud and darkness, forgotten by those he warned. Even there, Jeremiah remained faithful. Not because life was easy, not because hope was obvious, but because obedience mattered more than comfort. And still, the people refused to listen. Picture Jerusalem, a city that felt eternal. Its massive walls, a symbol of strength, now beginning to crack. The confidence that once filled every street started to drain away, replaced by a creeping dread. Babylon's armies were a relentless iron ring, tightening their grip day by day. First came the siege, then the hunger, and then a fear so thick you could feel it in the air. The warnings Jeremiah had preached for years were no longer prophecies. They were happening right before their eyes. When the city finally fell, it wasn't a quiet surrender. The sounds of destruction echoed through the valleys. The magnificent temple, the heart of their faith, was torn down and set ablaze. The royal palace burned, its smoke painting the sky with sorrow. The streets filled with grief and confusion. The unthinkable, the unimaginable, had become reality. Jeremiah, the prophet who had warned them, walked through the smoldering ruins of the city he loved. This wasn't a moment of victory for him. No, I told you so. It was pure heartbreak. He wept openly, his deep sorrow turning into poetry, his grief into a lament that would echo through history. Every broken stone seemed to whisper a warning once ignored. But even in this absolute devastation, Jeramir's voice wasn't silenced. He spoke to the survivors, the poor left behind, the refugees struggling to comprehend how their entire world had collapsed. And in the midst of the ashes, a new word emerged, fragile, unexpected, and powerful: hope. This wasn't a cheap hope that ignores pain or pretends the loss didn't happen. It was a hope that grows quietly in the ruins, like a resilient flower pushing through cracked pavement. Jeramir spoke of restoration, of a future beyond exile. He spoke of a new covenant, one written not on stone tablets, but directly on human hearts. He delivered a promise that God had not abandoned his people, even in their darkest hour. This hope wasn't for an instant fix. It was a seed planted for generations yet to come. Chains clinked as families were marched out of Judah. Babylon did not just conquer land, it uprooted lives. The strongest were taken first: craftsmen, leaders, soldiers. Carried away from their homes, their language, their worship, their identity. Jerusalem faded into memory as the road stretched eastward. This was the exile Jeramir had warned about. For those taken to Babylon, everything familiar was gone. Songs of Zion felt impossible to sing in a foreign land. Faith was tested in ways never known before. Was God still present here? Had the covenant ended in ashes? Jeramir, though not taken with the first captives, sent words after them. He told them to build houses, to plant gardens, to seek peace even in exile, to live fully, not in denial, but in trust. Exile was not the end. It was discipline, not abandonment. Years passed. Decades followed. Children grew up hearing stories of a homeland they had never seen. Faith had to be reimagined without a temple, without a king, without certainty. Yet God was still at work. Through exile, the people learned humility, dependence, identity beyond walls and rituals. Jeramir's voice lingered long after he was gone. A voice that warned, wept, endured, and hoped. Israel would one day return. The story would continue. Restoration would come, slowly, imperfectly, but undeniably. And Jeramir's life would stand as a testimony. That obedience is not measured by applause. That truth is not proven by popularity, and that even in exile, hope can survive. Because some voices are not meant to be loud. They are meant to last.